Hey guys, how's it going? It is Kyra here with another Diablo Immortal video. And in today's video, I want to talk about all the stats, going to rank them from best to worst, and also explaining all the stats so you guys can know exactly how these systems work in this game so you can actually stat your characters properly. And before you end this video, I do want to say thank you to all of the new subscribers to the channel. I think it's really awesome. We've had massive sub growth from switching over to Diablo Immortal, and I appreciate you guys for wanting to stick around. So here's the stats in this game. You can check this out in the settings screen. There's also a more attributes. Something that's actually really nice and helpful is you could just click these and you get a more detailed description of what you're actually gaining from these stats. And by far the most important stat in the game is going to be damage and life right here. These are the main things that matter in this game. And resonance just increases those amounts, increases equipment base attributes by 151.5% in my case, because I have a lot of resonance. This takes a lot of money to do this. That is why resonance is so important, is because it's increasing the life and damage of the character just by a raw percentage. So you take this legendary piece of gear here, notice how it has 749 damage. If you click here, base attributes 298, legendary gem bonus of 451 to be a total of 749 there. And then that is why it's giving so much more, is because of the resonance bonus there on the raw damage. Same thing here with life. See the bonus base attributes 9,792, legendary gem bonus 14k, and then that total is the 24,662. So that's why I think damage and life are the most important stats, but then your resonance increases those stats. So, people argue resonance, whatever. It's all the same thing. That's just a modifier for how much raw stats you have. Next is going to be combat rating. This stat, I think people mess up all the time, and let me explain it so you guys can fully understand what's going on here. All combat rating is a threshold based on arbitrary values in this game that are set by the game. And in PvP, that's different and more complicated. So the entire purpose of this guide is going to be PvE only. And right now I'm in Hell 4. And notice how I'm 21 points lower. That's just what the game sets for Hell 4. You can see all of this here. If you go and try to change this, boom, I hit this. 3250 is required here. If I go to Hell 3, 2120 is required here. If I go to Hell 2, 1220 is required there. My combat rating, when I'm under the threshold here, I'm only 21 points lower. That's really not that much. Decreases all the damage I deal by 15% and increases all the damage I take by 17%. So it's a massive punishment to be anywhere under the combat rating threshold that the game sets. Now let's go to Hell 3 here. Right here, I'm now I'm 1,109 points higher. Now all it does is increase the damage I deal by 22% and it reduces the damage I take by 18%. So the bonus I get is roughly the same amount in the positive portion than I would have done if I'm only 21 points lower. Like, that's the disparity there. So it just gets even bigger of a disparity, like almost unplayable, the higher you go in combat rating. That is why combat rating is so important. Arguably the most important, right up there with damage, life, all that stuff. Especially for PvE content, this is going to be the most important stat by far, because it just changes everything. So if everything is modified by the combat rating, then it takes everything else into account. The amount of damage and amount of life you have, essentially, because the more damage you take, the less life you effectively have. So now that we understand the concept of combat rating, that same concept applies to armor, armor pen, potency, and resistance, but for different things. So for example, armor reduces all damage taken and increases your blocked amount. Your armor is 49 higher than expected for your level and your current activity and difficulty, increasing your damage reduction from blocking by 7% from a base reduction of 50%. So it's going to be essentially testing the enemy's armor penetration. And if you're higher, you actually gain a percentage bonus to your blocking. And so what is blocking? Blocking is you have a block chance here, but increases the chance to block all damage from an enemy attack, but it will never block critical hits. So when you don't get crit, what happens is it reduces your damage by 50%. That's what a block is. And you need to have block chance to actually proc a block. And when you do, normally it's going to automatically reduce that non-critical damage by 50%. But if you actually beat them with armor over their armor pen, then based on the disparity, you're going to have more block percentage. So instead of 50%, in my case, at this hell difficulty, I now take 57% reduced damage. So now we take that same concept in reverse for armor penetration. Ignores some of the enemy armor and increases critical hit damage. Your armor penetration is 189 higher than the expected for your level in the current activity and difficulty, increasing your critical hit damage by 42% from a baseline of double damage. So this is additive with your critical hit damage you see here. So 42 plus 18, that's 60%. It's just a modifier of 2.6 towards your normal damage is going to be my critical hit damage at this hell difficulty. And this stat is actually incredibly important when you're just over the threshold from 0 to like 20 points, 30 points higher than that threshold. It is probably the most valuable stat in the game because it gets hit hard with diminishing returns. So you go from 0 to like 20% extra critical hit damage for only like 32 points. As you go up further, then you get a bonus, but not nearly as much. So that's when you're going to want to keep investing in your damage gems here. So just keep that in mind that the threshold is what matters. And that also changes with hell difficulty, just like combat rating. So we just saw what the threshold was for hell 3. Now we go to hell 4. Let's see exactly where we're at here. Now I'm only 9 higher. Look, 9 higher gets me 6%. 189 higher only got me 41%. You can really see the massive drop off in value there. Armor pin based on the initial threshold. That's the benefits of armor pin. Essentially, armor pin, if you have more armor pin than armor, then you're going to get more critical hit damage. If you have more armor, then you're going to get extra percentage block. And that really only matters if you actually have a decent block chance. I only have a 6%. So having more armor at the end of the day doesn't really matter too much, except for the fact that when they do crit on you, they're not going to have all this extra critical hit damage. So in a PvP environment, even though I'm trying to keep this very PvE, you just having a lot of armor means that their critical hit damage is not nearly as high. That's all that is what it's going to do for you. And at the end of the day, when it comes to whaling and all that stuff, a lot of these stats, you're just going to have to accept the fact that a lot of the whales are going to have so much more armor and so much more armor penetration that they're always going to have the max cap of 15% more block and 50% more critical hit damage. Those are like the caps, and it takes a ton. It takes a lot more to actually reach that point. They're just going to be trending towards that point. It just takes a big difference there. An example here would be this whale, just so guys can get an idea of just how pointless it is to really focus on it too much. Yes, you're going to want to do your daily activities in the Lord of Horderim to be able to get this stuff, and eventually you'll get there. These are the kind of potential sets you're going to be dealing with. He has like over 1,000 over me in armor and armor penetration, potency and resistance. So stuff like this is what you're going to be dealing with potentially in arena. So just make sure that you're not putting too much time or too much effort into these stats. These are more stats that you just want to reach your PvE thresholds and not necessarily the PvP sides, because there's always going to be the bigger fish. There's always going to be the bigger spender, and you're just going to essentially, I don't have armor, or I don't have armor pin. I don't have armor, essentially to him. For example. So I just want to throw that out there that they are thresholds, and that difference will matter. But in PvE, it's set to a reasonable amount. As long as you're just doing your Legacy of Horderim and all that stuff, you're going to get enough to increase this right here, your Legacy of Horderim, and get like resistance, armor pin, stuff like that. And this is all free to play stuff. You can do this every day. Totally fine to do. Also, you can farm 6 gems every single day out of hidden layers, and then also 12 just throughout the day if you can get into a party of 4. And so you'll eventually be able to level up your gems. It's going to take forever. It's going to take weeks/months to ever get to that point. But eventually this is going to go up. It's not completely hopeless. So eventually, so make sure you're doing that every day. But at the same time, in a PvP environment, it's over. There's always going to be someone bigger. But in a PvE environment, it's actually really nice because the thresholds, even at the higher ranks, are really reasonable. And they're really impactful too. So make sure you focus on those. Then next we have potency and resistance. So right here, this is very similar. This whole concept, all these concepts are very similar. Combat rating, armor pin, armor penetration, and potency resistance are no different. It's just, what do they affect? And right here, compared against enemy resistance to modify the duration of all harmful effects, your potency is 3 lower than the resistance of monsters in your level in the current activity, reducing durations by 1%. Against players, durations are reduced by 50%. There's a cap here because the amount of potency difference between a whale and a non-whale would make it to where if you feared someone or stunned someone, it would be forever. They would just be perma-stunned or perma-feared. So they don't have that. At least there's some kind of cap here built into the game to prevent people just having this massive disparity. But it's still very impactful, especially if you're trying to CC people. So here's the resistance. So this is going to be a check. If you have more potency than resistance. So here, let's actually go down to a lower difficulty, so we actually have the advantage here. Compared against your enemy resistance to modify the duration of all harmful effects, your potency is 136 higher than the resistance of monsters your level and the current activity and difficulty, increasing durations by 12%. When against players, you can gain up to 50%. So if I'm a massive whale, I had like 1500 potency, boom, I would have a 50% increase to all of my durations, for example. And that's insane, especially for classes unlike a demon hunter that actually has good seed. Like if I was a crusader, if I was a necromancer, there's so many classes out there that have crazy seed. A monk, for example, would be hilarious with a ton of potency over the enemy's resistance. Over here, your resistance is 46% of your resistance is 46 higher than the potency of monsters in your level, reducing the durations by 4%. Against players, durations are reduced by 35%. So here's another effect that I'm over the cap for this PvE threshold. So I'm going to reduce the durations if I get feared by an enemy monster, 4% reduction in the time that I would have been feared or stunned or whatever, slowed. So these two stats, in my opinion, in PvE are nice, but they're not a priority, not at all. In PvP, I would say they're a big priority, and you got to slow farm them. You can slow farm them as a free-to-play. You could whale out for them, but I just really don't think it's efficient, and they are very impactful, but the amount of money required to actually get a good amount of potency or a good amount of resistance is just not worth it at all, and eventually, over the long haul, you will be able to upgrade these things. Unlike legendary gems that you're just kind of SOL on against people that are willing to spend. So these two things for a PvE perspective, not that important. I do think armor penetration is actually pretty important in that environment because the critical hit damage is awesome everywhere. This is going to be especially when you're just over the cap, an incredibly important threshold to hit. And then obviously combat rating is going to be the king here and the thing that you really want to focus on to make sure you deal more damage. Big thing about this though is the benefits for you cap at 22%. So that's about 1,000 combat rating over. You're always going to be doing 22% more at that point. Even if I had 2,000, 3,000, doesn't matter. I'm capped on combat rating for this difficulty tier. Still, getting more combat rating is going to be important because the next difficulty is coming around the corner. Hell 4 is going to be available for people in about a week or two, depending on how big of a grinder you are. And that combat rating cap is going to go up to 3,250. So if I want to maximize my combat rating benefit, I need 4,250 to get that 22%. So combat rating is always going to be king here, but eventually it becomes a worthless stat during those moments there. So once people hit at the very end of the day here in PvE, eventually combat rating will be worthless because once we're at like 6,025, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, to hit that 22% extra damage threshold and 18% reduced damage threshold, for a PvE perspective, we are done with combat rating. We don't need any more. Then it's going to be more important to be able to min-max other stuff. And what is that other stuff you can actually min-max? And that is going to be set effects here, these magic affinities on your gear. And when it comes to these pieces of gear here, most of the time people look at this, they look at these main attributes. And these main attributes, strength, vitality, and willpower, or if you're a caster, intelligence, vitality, and willpower, the bigger number here, the more combat rating you get. Because over here, when you get a strength, notice this. It increases damage by 74 and the combat rating by 581. So it's a 1-to-1 ratio. If for every strength I have, for every fortitude I have, and for every vitality/willpower I have, doesn't matter. I always get 1 point of combat rating. Whereas with strength, you also get another effect. It's like 0.3 and you get damage for this one. In intelligence would be the same way. I'd get damage, but I'm not a intelligence wearing class. That would be a wizard or a necromancer. That would also be damaged at a 0.3 ratio. Then we have fortitude. This gives armor and armor penetration by 73. So it's like 10% in armor and armor penetration. And so then here's vitality. Gives you a boost to life, 1,476, 492 vitality. And then lastly, we have willpower here. Increases potency by 49 and resistance by 49. So it's very similar to fortitude. So I would say out of all of these stats, you obviously want strength, and that's going to be the main one, or intelligence. The next one is going to be vitality. This is probably going to be the best one. And then after that, it's going to be armor pen and armor. You could argue that fortitude is right up there with it because you get that extra armor penetration to help you with that threshold. Then I would say the last one, willpower, is definitely going to be the least important here, but it is nice. It's not a bad thing. But for the most part, when you're gearing your characters, you're always going to be picking things with just higher numbers here because that equals higher combat rating. But eventually, we're not going to need combat rating. But that's way down the line. So for the most part, people see the bigger number here and just boom, put it on. And I think for 99% of people, that's the move right there. You see a bigger number here, you equip it. And then you obviously essence transfer back to your good legendary piece. Then the thing I want to mention though is that sometimes these magic affinities are insane. The difference in quality of gear you can get based on your magic affinities is hilarious, because this one only has one attribute and it's critical hit damage increase. That's a good one in my opinion. Some of these can get two. Item base life increased by 4.5, damage reduced by 2%. Obviously, these can be way better as a demon hunter. I just want all damage. Like, give me critical hit rate, give me critical damage. This one right here, your primary attacks have a 9% chance to reduce enemies' attacks and movement speed. You know, it could be a lot better. And this is where the grinds are truly going to come through later on, when we don't have to worry about combat rating so much. We can just focus on these and actually getting good magic affinities, getting a triple roll. That's it. You could just really start to see it add up when you get more and more triple rolls and good versions of triple rolls, how much more powerful your character can be. Then, especially over here, like look at the differences in these effects here. If you're a summon class, damage done by your summons increased by 8%. You can have like a ton of those going on. Obviously, you can have the 6-beat set bonus eventually. These are going to become incredibly powerful. And the difference between a character, like you're going to be able to see people that are the same combat rating, but some people are going to have like triple all magic FXs versus the guy that only has like 1 or 2 per slot. And that guy's going to get completely destroyed by the guy with the quote unquote same combat rating, because they actually farmed a ton of gear and there's so much more potential here and it takes so much grinding. The reason why we don't really have that yet and people move on from their good pieces is because we're constantly needing to get more and more combat rating. As we level up our Paragon, the combat rating potential of these pieces goes up with it. So we have to replace them. Eventually, we're not going to have to replace them, and then we get to really sit on those triple roll, triple magic affinity pieces, and we're going to be able to stack all these a ton. And eventually get, you know, then there's a range between where you can roll. Like this could be like 3% critical hit damage or 6% critical hit damage. So I know this is a ton of information for you guys. And if this is helpful, please like the video. That'd be absolutely fantastic. But I don't want to overwhelm you. I just want to say that this is how statting works in this game. And then this is how the priorities work when it comes to actually focusing on this gear and why people are focusing so hard on combat rating at the moment versus these other things. But eventually, I want people to know that this is what you're going to have to think about down the road. And I think we're actually not that far away from that, because we're going to have a massive gap here from Health 3 to Health 4. Because right here, this is going to be a long time. We have from 3250 combat rating. This one's going to be 5025. So there's going to be a moment here for quite a while, and we need to be 240 to be able to even equip this gear. So I can see people potentially be not having to worry too much about their combat rating at a certain point and just only focus on leveling up and getting better magic affixes, and maybe not caring too much if their combat rating's a little higher or a little lower. And then eventually when we get closer to the 240, then you go right back to actually really caring about your combat rating. Then once you hit the 5,000, once you get like 5,500, then it's going to be, this is the final grind. This is going to be the end of the game for you. And how that end of the game goes is going to be really grinding the set pieces, and not only the set pieces, but good magic affinities on the correct set bonus for you. That's where it's going to end. Hopefully this explains the stats in the priorities that actually matter, and knowing what things actually do in this game. To kind of summarize, at the moment, the most important thing to continuously get is combat rating, which equals just more fortitude, like these primary stats here. Damage, life, resonance, that's going to be the best thing there. So that's where the whale stat comes in. And from there, I would say armor penetration is really good. Then after that, everything else is kind of a bonus in my opinion. Critical hit chance is amazing if you can get it on these pieces here. Critical hit damage is amazing too. If you're a summon class, I really feel like these increased damage to summons. Plus, I feel like this is out of the scope of the video. These magic affinities, like the specific ones, I don't want to get too big into, because there's so many different potential roles here. This is like such a complex topic that's going to need its own video. But I hope that at least this is a introductory version of this to understand what's actually important for you, how to progress, and eventually we're going to be able to min-max down the road. But at the moment we can't, because combat rating needs to keep going up, and for it to keep going up, we're going to have to keep replacing our legendaries. Well, that's going to do it for this video.